Don't want to wear this anymore? Let me take it off for you, Chloe said, her voice gentle, despite the icy look in her eyes. She gazed at the frail figure in the hospital bed. You ungrateful wretch. Daniel spat, his voice raspy and weak, yet filled with venom. The heart monitor beside him beeped erratically, as if protesting his outburst. Chloe chuckled, her voice barely a whisper. Ungrateful? It's a shame you're dying at the hands of an ungrateful wretch, isn't it? Daniel's eyes widened, his hand trembling as he pointed at her. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. His eyes were a mixture of fury and anguish. He struggled to breathe, each gasp a painful effort. Low. He choked out, the unspoken curse hanging heavy in the air. There's something you should know, Chloe continued, her voice as sharp as a knife. Ryan's car accident, that was me. I wanted you to know the pain of losing your only son. Daniel's trembling finger pointed at her, his lips moving soundlessly. The rage in his eyes intensified, burning like a wildfire. He couldn't believe the girl he'd raised, the daughter he'd taken in, could be so cruel, so venomous. The realization that she was responsible for Ryan's death ripped through him. He remembered the day Chloe had arrived, a shy girl of 6 in a pink dress and pigtails, clutching a doll. Her innocence and vulnerability had touched him and his wife, and they had welcomed her into their home. He had nurtured a viper. Oh, and one more thing, Chloe added. My name is Chloe Carter. My mother was Catherine Carter. Daniel's face contorted in shock. Chloe gave him one last look before turning and walking out. 2 bodyguards stood at the door. Miss Carter, they murmured. He needs to rest. Don't disturb him, Chloe said coldly. Yes, Mississippi. As Chloe left, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor in the room flatlined. That evening, Chloe, draped in a black gown and a white mink stole, moved through the crowded auction gala. The air buzzed with conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses. Well, if it isn't Miss Carter. My, how you've grown. Last I saw you, we were just kids playing together. Now you're running the entire Blake empire. Quite the accomplishment, a voice dripped with sarcasm. Chloe turned to see Julian standing behind her, swirling a glass of red wine. Her expression remained neutral. Cousin Julian, it's been a while. Julian scoffed. Cousin? Don't flatter yourself. My aunt divorced that old man years ago, and my cousin, well, he's gone. I'm certainly not related to you. My mother may have divorced him, but legally, she's still my mother, Chloe retorted calmly. Julian narrowed his eyes. You're a cold-hearted woman, Chloe. Ryan's been gone for 3 years. Have you even bothered to visit my aunt? She's all alone. Chloe merely smiled, her eyes glinting with defiance. Julian drained his glass. Let's hope you don't live to regret your actions, he said coldly, before turning and walking away. Miss Carter, a voice whispered in her ear. The hospital called. Mr. Blake is gone. Chloe's lips curved into a barely perceptible smile. Give him a proper burial. Yes, Mississippi. Stepping out onto the balcony, Chloe paused, looking up at the moon. A memory surfaced. Ryan, why is the moon fuller on the 16th than the 15th? A little girl asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. A slightly older boy stood beside her, his voice gentle. It's an astronomical phenomenon. Ryan, can you get me the moon? The little girl asked earnestly. Chloe, if you get a perfect score on your next test, I'll get you the moon, the boy promised, stroking her hair. Humph, the little girl pouted. A woman's voice interrupted. Who's upset my little princess? She scooped the girl into her arms. Ryan, why are you teasing your sister? The boy smiled as the little girl stuck her tongue out at him. Mom, I would never. She's the one who always teases me. Mommy, Ryan said he'll only get me the moon if I get a perfect score, the little girl complained. The woman laughed. Sweetheart, are you hungry? I made your favorite chestnut cake. Yay, the little girl squealed. The boy pinched her cheek and headed inside. Mommy, Ryan's bullying me, the little girl whined. I'll go give him a spanking, the woman said, laughing. Yes. Spank Ryan. Back inside the gala, Chloe sipped her wine, the familiar burn a welcome distraction. Snippets of conversation reached her. Isn't that her? I heard her father died. He wasn't her real father. No love lost there. Now she gets the entire Blake fortune. Actually, Mr. Blake started declining after Ryan's death. Aged overnight, lost interest in the company. Really? I heard he was preoccupied with a younger woman. Maybe trying for another son. Apparently, he couldn't have any more children. Otherwise, they would have had their own. He and his ex-wife have been divorced for 10 years. So, the adopted daughter gets it all. What luck. It's fate. Chloe waited for them to finish before approaching them with a bright smile. Mrs. Grant, lovely to see you. Where's your husband? Mrs. Grant beamed at her. Oh, Chloe, dear, he's chatting with some of the other CEOs. Chloe nodded. Is he? I've been looking for him everywhere. I overheard 2 waiters saying they saw him going upstairs with his secretary. Mrs. Grant's smile vanished. Excuse me, Chloe, I have to go. Chloe smiled sweetly as Mrs. Grant hurried away. She turned to another woman, who immediately excused herself to go to the restroom. Chloe smiled graciously and turned back to the crowd. Suddenly, a familiar figure flashed through the crowd, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Chloe splashed cold water on her face in the restroom, trying to steady her nerves. For over 3 years, she had been living on the edge, haunted by sleepless nights and tormented by Ryan's memory. His voice echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of her betrayal. Why had he walked into her trap, knowing full well what she was capable of? His eyes, so deep and yet so cold, seemed to see right through her. His voice, low and mesmerizing, held an undeniable authority. Ryan, I miss you. She whispered. She looked up at her reflection, wiping the water from her face, only to realize they were tears. A movement in the mirror caught her eye. She spun around and ran out into the corridor. Ryan. She called out, as the figure disappeared around the corner. Ms. Carter, is everything all right? Julian asked, emerging from the hallway, his eyes narrowing at the tear streaks on her face. Chloe froze. Was that Ryan? Julian scoffed. Ms. Carter, have you been seeing ghosts? I'm easily spooked, you know. Julian, tell me. Was that Ryan? Chloe demanded. Crazy. Julian muttered, shaking his head and walking away. Chloe cried out, collapsing to the floor. The next day, Chloe's secretary, Hannah, asked, Ms. Carter, are you still going tonight? Yes. But you're not well. I'm fine, much better, Chloe said, forcing a smile. Ms. Carter, Hannah hesitated. What is it? Please be careful. Don't take those pills anymore. Mr. Lin found you unconscious last night. It could have been much worse. I'll be careful. You can go now. Yes, Ms. Carter. That night, Chloe prepared for a crucial business negotiation with a notorious Playboy CEO. She had considered avoiding it, but as the head of the company, she couldn't expose her female employees to such a risk. She entered the private room and froze. Among the group of men, she saw him. Quickly composing herself, she plastered a smile on her face. Good evening, everyone. Ms. Carter, you made it. Harry, the host, greeted her warmly. Chloe nodded and took her seat. Ms. Carter, allow me to introduce Mr. Julian Parker, Vice President of HR Group from Brookhaven. He's here to discuss investing in the Jade Cove development. Chloe was surprised. Julian, a renowned surgeon, was now a businessman? Mr. Parker, this is Ms. Chloe Carter, CEO of Blake Enterprises. Ms. Carter, we meet again, Julian said, his expression unreadable. You two know each other? Harry asked, surprised. Indeed, Julian said, a faint smile playing on his lips. Mr. Parker, Chloe acknowledged, her voice tight. Well, now that we're all acquainted, let's enjoy ourselves, Harry said jovially. The atmosphere grew lively, fueled by alcohol. Chloe, already feeling the effects of several drinks, felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Julian raised his glass. Ms. Carter, to our reunion. Chloe met his gaze, recognizing the challenge. She forced a smile. Mr. Parker, to business. Julian smirked and downed his drink. The others, sensing Julian's animosity, and eager to secure a deal with HR Group, began plying Chloe with drinks. She eventually succumbed, collapsing unconscious. Take her to the Emerald Room, Julian instructed. Mr. Parker, if Ms. Carter finds out. Don't worry. I'll handle it. Two men dragged Chloe towards the private entertainment area in the basement. Julian reached for his cigarettes, then paused, frowning. What are you doing here? Who was that? No one important, Julian replied dismissively. Ryan's gaze was sharp. Julian shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. Shouldn't you be with your mother? What are you doing in New Haven? Julian, do you know what I despise most? Ryan's voice was like ice. Julian paled. He took a drag of his cigarette. Don't tell me you still have feelings for her. A shadow crossed Ryan's face. He turned and walked away. Aren't you afraid she'll try to hurt you again? Julian called after him, his voice laced with concern. In the Emerald Room, Chloe was pinned down, struggling against the hands forcing a liquid down her throat. Have your fun, boys. Just don't kill her. Don't worry, boss. As consciousness returned, Chloe realized what was happening. Get off me. I'll give you anything you want. She looked around the dimly lit room, her eyes wide with terror. She cowered in the corner, fighting against the hands that tore at her clothes. We don't want your money. We want you, one of the men sneered. He turned to his companion. Come on, let's get started. The drug was taking effect, clouding Chloe's mind, making her struggle weaker. Suddenly, the door burst open. Who the hell interrupts my fun? One of the men roared, then froze, recognizing the newcomer. Mr. Blake. Get out. The two men scrambled out of the room. Ryan's gaze fell on Chloe, curled up on the bed, her breathing ragged, her clothes miraculously still intact. He had arrived just in time. He strode out of the room, his face grim. Julian stood outside. Ryan's fist connected with Julian's jaw. What the hell were you thinking? Ryan's voice was low and dangerous. Cousin, she killed you. She stole your company. And Daniel Blake, he was your father. Julian yelled back. That's my business, Ryan growled. My business? If it wasn't for her, my aunt wouldn't be suffering. What did she ever do to deserve this? Chloe even set Daniel up with another woman. Julian, there won't be a next time. Ryan's voice was laced with menace. Julian punched the wall, his knuckles splitting open. Fine. I'm done. See if I care if she destroys you. Julian, she's had a hard life, Ryan said quietly. A hard life? And what about my aunt? Julian's voice cracked. No woman deserved to discover her husband with another woman in their own bed, on their anniversary. My father, he was a victim too, Ryan admitted, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. If his father hadn't been blinded by lust, none of this would have happened. Catherine, Chloe's mother, had been his father's secretary, a beautiful and intelligent woman. They had begun an affair during a business trip, a secret that eventually unraveled, destroying Catherine's life and leading to her suicide. Catherine's husband, Peter, humiliated and pressured by his own mother who despised Catherine, had quickly remarried and abandoned Chloe at the Blakes' doorstep 3 months later. Ryan had found her there, a small, lost girl clutching a doll. "Brother," she had whispered, her voice so soft and timid it had pierced his heart. He was 15, on the cusp of adulthood, but he had taken her in, cherishing her as a little sister, a bright spot in his life. When Chloe turned 18, she confessed her feelings for him. Ryan had been stunned, thrilled. But then, her behavior had become increasingly erratic, and he began to suspect a hidden agenda. His mother had known all along. She had tried to guide Chloe, taking her to temples, encouraging her to do good deeds. But nothing seemed to quell the darkness growing inside her. "Fine. I'm staying out of your family drama," Julian said, walking away. Ryan entered the emerald room. Chloe was gasping for air, her eyes glazed over. She suddenly lunged at him, clinging to him desperately. "Pills, give me the pills," she murmured against his cheek. "What pills?" Ryan asked, holding her tightly. "I feel sick. I need my pills," she pleaded, her eyes red and pleading. Ryan hesitated, then carried her to the bathroom. He placed her in the bathtub and turned on the cold shower. "No, it's cold. I want to get out," Chloe protested, struggling to stand. "Just a minute, you'll feel better soon," Ryan said, holding her down. "No, let me out." Ryan looked at her, her face pale and vulnerable. He averted his gaze, his grip tightening. "No, Ryan, help me," Chloe whimpered. Ryan froze. He stepped into the bathtub, pulling her close as the cold water cascaded over them. Chloe woke up with a pounding headache in her own apartment. She looked around, disoriented. The memory of the 2 men, hazy and disturbing, made her shudder. She checked herself, relieved to find she was dressed in her own pajamas. She cautiously stepped out of the bedroom. "Ms. Carter, you're awake." Hannah called from the kitchen, holding a bowl of steaming porridge. Chloe stared at her. "What are you doing here? Don't you remember?" Hannah asked, surprised. "You called me last night, asked me to come get you." "I did?" Chloe frowned, trying to recall the events of the previous night. Hannah thought for a moment. "No, nothing else happened. You were slumped over the table when I arrived." Hannah's earnest expression convinced Chloe she wasn't lying. She excused herself and went to the bathroom. Staring at her reflection, she examined her neck, finding no marks. Had it all been a nightmare? The men, the familiar scent, just her imagination? Later that day, Hannah entered her office. "Ms. Carter, a package for you." "Open it," Chloe said, engrossed in her work. Hannah picked up the package, then paused. "It says open personally. Chloe frowned, took the package, and opened it. Photograph slid out. Her blood ran cold. A woman beamed at the camera, nestled close to a man. They radiated happiness. Chloe's eyes scanned each photo, searching for answers. She picked up the accompanying documents, her hand trembling. As she reached the last page, her body went rigid. She stared at the words, the clear descriptions, the detailed data. Her mind reeled, caught between relief and denial. She clutched her head, groaning in pain. "Ms. Carter, are you all right?" "Pills," she whispered. Hannah rushed to her desk drawer and retrieved a bottle, handing her a pill. Chloe swallowed the pill, the pain receding slightly. She dismissed Hannah with a wave of her hand. Back in her office, Hannah picked up her phone. "Mr. Parker, Ms. Carter has seen the documents." "Good," Julian replied. He turned to the man standing by the window. "Cousin, things are moving along nicely. When are you returning?" "Tonight," Ryan said. Julian smiled. "I'll call Aunt Emily." Ryan turned around, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "She set up a blind date for you." Julian grinned. Cousin, it's time you settled down. Aunt Emily wants grandchildren. It is time, Ryan agreed quietly. Chloe parked in her underground garage. As she opened the car door, a figure darted out, blocking her path. Chloe jumped, startled. She looked up to see a man staring at her expectantly. Chloe, darling, it's your father. Chloe frowned. Dad, what do you want? Chloe, your brother's company is having some trouble. Can you help him out? Peter asked quickly. Chloe's frown deepened. I don't have a brother. She locked her car and walked towards the elevator. Chloe, don't be heartless. If my mother hadn't left you at the Blake's doorstep, you wouldn't be where you are today. Peter called after her. Chloe stopped and turned around. I call you Dad because you gave me life. But I've repaid that debt. Chloe, I'm your father. You should support me in my old age. Peter whined. Chloe's eyes hardened. Support you? You left me crying at the Blake's gate, begging you to take me home. And you and Grandma filled my head with lies, convincing me my mother was a worthless woman. Catherine was a shameless woman. She chased after Daniel Blake, divorced me, and didn't even want you, Peter sneered. Oh, you have the nerve to say that. If you hadn't been so obsessed with sucking up to Daniel Blake, my mother wouldn't have worked at Blake Enterprises in the first place. You manipulated her into giving you all of Blake's resources. You're a selfish, manipulative man who used his own family for personal gain. Chloe spat. So what? I didn't force her to sleep with him. Peter yelled. Daniel, like a cunning fox, had exploited Catherine's vulnerabilities, trapping her in a web of coercion and manipulation. Blinded by his charm and promises, Catherine had fallen deeper and deeper into his grasp. Chloe's heart hardened as she looked at the sneer on Peter's face. She pulled out a wad of cash and threw it at him. Don't ever show your face to me again. She turned and walked away. Peter scooped up the money. This will keep me going for a while. He looked up at Chloe's retreating back. Since you're feeling generous, I'll tell you something. Ryan's getting married. Chloe spun around, grabbing Peter by the collar. What did you say? Ryan's getting married? Yes, in a few days, Peter confirmed. But he's dead. My dear Chloe, the Blakes are more powerful than you realize. Ryan's mother, the Martins, they have influence. His words struck Chloe like a thunderbolt. She stumbled back, her world tilting on its axis. Half an hour later, Chloe stood on a highway overpass, the news report echoing in her mind. The Martin family patriarch's nephew tied the knot today. The reporters hadn't named him, but Chloe knew. It was Ryan, her brother, the man she loved. Tears streamed down her face as the wind whipped around her. Oh my God, someone's jumping. Help. Chloe closed her eyes, her body tilting forward, the sensation of falling, strangely peaceful. It had all started with her, and it would end with her. The world would be rid of Chloe Carter. 1 year later, Chloe opened her eyes to a familiar voice. Awake? She turned to see Ryan, fully dressed, looking at her tenderly. Morning, husband, she murmured, a smile gracing her lips. Get up. Breakfast is ready. Okay. The day Chloe had jumped, Ryan's world had shattered. He'd been getting ready for his wedding when Julian burst in, phone in hand. Ryan, it's Chloe. Something's happened. Ryan had grabbed the phone, his blood turning to ice as he listened to the frantic voice on the other end. He'd shoved past Julian and raced to the hospital. He'd paced outside the operating room for hours, his heart pounding with fear. Chloe had survived, but she had fallen into a deep coma. 6 months later, she had miraculously awakened, but her memory was gone. She had become intensely attached to Ryan, following him everywhere. Ryan's mother, Emily, had always had a soft spot for Chloe. She suggested Ryan marry her. Despite everything, Emily had always seen Chloe as a daughter. 20 years of nurturing couldn't be erased. She hoped that marriage would heal Chloe and solidify the bond between them. "Chloe, dear, drink your medicine," Emily said, intercepting Chloe as she and Ryan headed downstairs. Chloe obediently took the bowl and drank the bitter concoction without complaint. "Mom, don't make her drink that stuff anymore," Ryan said, grimacing at the smell. Emily hesitated. She knew how bitter the medicine was, how much Chloe disliked it. But Chloe had taken dangerous drugs before her accident, damaging her health and affecting her fertility. "It's okay, honey," Chloe said, squeezing Ryan's hand, a gentle smile on her face. Ryan sighed, pinching her cheek affectionately. Time passed, and Chloe's body slowly healed. Then, she discovered she was pregnant. One afternoon, Chloe lay in bed, lost in thought. Ryan emerged from the bathroom. "Is he okay?" she asked softly. "Who?" Ryan sat beside her. "My father." Ryan paused. "You know I haven't lost my memory, don't you?" "You know everything," she whispered. "It's late. Go to sleep," Ryan said, pulling her close. Chloe nestled against him, tears silently tracing a path down her cheek. "I'm sorry." Ryan held her tighter, saying nothing. Moonlight filtered through the curtains. "I can't give you the moon," Ryan whispered, "but I can give you the moonlight." "Ryan," Chloe murmured. In a quiet corner of a nursing home, a man in a wheelchair waved weakly as Emily approached. "Daniel, I'm taking you home," she said softly, pushing his wheelchair. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He turned and grasped her hand. "I'm so sorry, Emily." Emily smiled gently. "I'm not a forgiving woman, especially not towards a man like you. But Ryan has forgiven you. Chloe has forgiven you. You're their father. I have to accept that, for their sake." If Daniel had died, she wouldn't have cared. But he was alive, and despite his silence, she knew Ryan still cared for him. Daniel might have been a terrible husband, but he loved his son fiercely. He had aged decades after Ryan's death, spending his days staring at Ryan's photograph, refusing to eat or drink. In that moment of profound grief, Emily had seen the depth of his love for his son. It was enough. A few months later, Chloe gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Their arrival filled the Blake household with joy and laughter, a new beginning for a family scarred by the past. The end.